Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on leadership principles. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, please note that all attendees are on listen mode only to minimize background noise and to allow for the best audio experience. This session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be provided to all participants after the webinar. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature. We will do our best to answer as many as we can during the session. If we aren't able to get to your question today, our team will be happy to follow up with you after the webinar. Thank you for joining again today's leadership training. My name is Margie Mendieta, and I'm the HR Specialist Lead here at Advanced Staff. I am excited to be the moderator for today's session. I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker, Rebecca Woods. Rebecca is a Senior Director of HR here at Advanced Staff HR, and with over 25 years of experience in human resources, payroll, benefits, workers' compensation, and unemployment insurance, she brings a wealth of knowledge to today's discussion. With that, please welcome me in welcoming Rebecca Woods.
Oh, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending upon where you're coming in from. Really appreciate you joining the session today and hope that we can provide some valuable information for you to take away with you and to apply in the workplace or wherever you decide to apply it. We have probably some content that may be a little bit under an hour, so just give you a heads up. You may get some time back depending upon how much time we spend. But we've got some good information that we hope will be beneficial to you. So first, we're going to start out with this, and I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but this is whitewater rafting. And if you have, you probably have a picture of yourself on the mantle somewhere that shows this activity, because it's not something that goes unappreciated and undocumented. I'd like to just point out in this particular picture, you can see toward the back with the blue helmet on, there is somebody sitting in the back, and it appears to be the guide on the whitewater raft. So the one with the blue helmet is sitting in the back, guiding the trip and keeping people safe. The reason we talk about whitewater rafting to begin with and associated with leadership principles is that whitewater rafting has a lot of parallels with leadership principles. First of all, you load up a whole boat full of adventurers, which is what you do in business at your work. And in this particular case, when you go whitewater rafting, the leader sits in the back of the boat. The leader sits back there, and they provide a rudder for all situations, regardless of what the situation is. And those situations can run from very smooth water, and in the whitewater rafting world, that those floats are soft floats, and you are going through class 1 or class 2 water. You could also move to more difficult rapids, like a class 3 or class 4, for those of you who have gone whitewater rafting, or you can go all the way up to frightening rapids and chasms that could actually sink your raft. And those are referred to some class 4s up to class 6. So depending upon the level of what's going on in your company, someday may be just a class 1 or class 2, some days are 4s or 6s, and your raft could possibly sink. What's different and what is applicable here is for all of you to be that leader in the back of the boat, providing a rudder regardless of what situation is occurring. One thing that I've noted about whitewater rafting too is that sometimes less experienced boaters sit near the back of the raft, where the leader can be of more help when needed, because they're within arm's length. They can get to them, they can hear them better, and they can follow instruction a little bit better because they can hear and they can see what the leader is doing. And sometimes your very experienced boaters may sit in the very front of the raft and take water directly to their face. So they're the ones that when you hit the hard rapids, they may be picking up more water and more stress and more of everything, but they're more suited to it because they have more experience. To begin with, then, what is a leader? a leader, in my estimation, is a rudder. They're not a steering wheel. So when you step out to be a leader, you're not steering the entire ship, the entire activity, everything. You are a rudder, and a rudder just provides guidance at the level needed for each situation and person. So if you're floating in calm waters, you may need a rudder that is just barely providing some steerage and some movement. And if you're in rough waters or anything in between, you may need a little bit different steerage. That person, and finding out yourself what person you are, needs to apply the right pressure on the rudder at the right time. One of the things you do is to understand the landscape, pay attention to all the details around you, and know what type of water you're floating on. Also, you help craft the plan, but you don't dictate all the details. Another role of the leader is to work to remove barriers to success, but not own all of the ideas. So those are just some definitions of a leader in my estimation. Looking at leadership as from anyone's perspective should begin with the fact that leading people is a privilege. If you are a leader, whether you're a lead or you're moving into leadership, or you're a supervisor, a manager, a CEO, CFO, whatever you are, leading people is a privilege. You want to keep that in mind, because a lot of people don't have the opportunity to lead. And having the opportunity means that you can work with people and help them become the best that they can be. That's a privilege and an honor to be involved in that, regardless of the level of leadership you're applying. Also, leadership can be applied for people who are not specifically deemed leadership. So being a lead person in your work group is also a privilege. If people look to you for information and for support and for guidance, what a great place to be, and what a privilege that is. As we all know, leadership positions don't come with a complete manual on how to do things right. In fact, there is so much material out there that you'd never run out of material to read. But if there were such a thing as a manual, you probably wouldn't read it. Anyway, there is just so much information on leadership. And being right and doing leadership right is really a matter of opinion. It can be, there are certain things that are definitely wrong, but there are many things that are debatable whether they're right or not, and they can be situational. Leaders all make mistakes, and that's something that everyone should realize, that part of growing and becoming a better leader is making mistakes. Hopefully you make as few as possible and you don't repeat mistakes, but it is really the conscious recovery from mistakes that really matters. So some of the mistakes that we make as leaders are the ones that make us the best leaders we can be. We start out this session then to look at some of the basic principles of leadership that can help shape how you move forward in a leadership role. There are many, many principles. We're just going to cover a few of them because there are too many to cover absolutely everything. To begin with, let's pour a foundation of leadership. If you don't pour a foundation, as you know, if you're building a house, if you pour a concrete foundation, you can probably build a pretty good house on top. If you pour a foundation made of sand or in quicksand, you don't have a good place to build a house on top. So pouring the foundation is really important. As I said before, there's no shortage of leadership ideas, books, brochures, statements, and concepts. They're all out there. You just have to go through your LinkedIn. I mean, they're popping up constantly. Little short quotes about leadership and precepts about leadership, and many, many, many of them have value, and they can provide ongoing guidance as you move through stages of leadership. And as you go, you can incorporate concepts into your daily work and explore new ideas and see what sticks, see what works best for you. But before the concepts are really effective, make sure that you pour a good foundation upon which you can build a solid house. if you pour a foundation on a pile of sand, your house will tumble down, or it won't be the best house that it can be. So although some of these leadership principles that we'll talk about today seem rote and ritual, and some people will say, oh, of course I would do that, and of course that's an effective foundation of leadership, or a portion of leadership. But examine yourself to look at how you actually execute on these foundational ideas. The first one that I'd like to start out with, and the principles of leadership, is to be honest. You don't stretch the truth. Stretching the truth is an issue. If you stretch the truth to make a point, because you need to have something be bigger and more dramatic, that's not a great thing, because stretching the truth puts you in a position to lose credibility. If you lose credibility, then making the point or being dramatic or getting someone to act is ineffective, and you end up losing your credibility. So being honest is really important, and knowing what to be honest about. You don't want to cover things up, but at the same time, you don't want to not tell people about things that are going on that deserve honesty and deserve a direct approach. That doesn't mean that everything should be put out there for everyone, but there are many, many situations where you have the opportunity to be honest and upfront with people and help them understand what the situation is. So just a really quick application exercise. So let's say you're a supervisor for a company and you found out through the grapevine the company's having difficulty selling a particular product line. You know that if the product line doesn't sell, a couple of your people in the department may be impacted by layoff or reduced hours. It hasn't happened yet. In order to give them a heads up so they're not surprised, you call each of them into your office confidentially and let them know that they should maybe start looking for other positions inside or outside the company. After each leaves, you feel really good that you were honest with them so they could deal with whatever might come up. So you need to ask yourself, is this an appropriate way to conduct yourself as a leader? Is this something that you should do? Is it honest and upfront to tell people about a grapevine or grapevine situation, or something that is not solid and has not been vetted completely? The answer could be yes or no, depending upon the situation, but you want to be extremely careful about what you share with people in order to and assign to the concept of honesty. Another situation, one of the employees who does not report to you has been having some performance issues, and you heard that that person might be terminated. You decide to let your direct reports know the employee's in trouble and will likely be terminated because several of them need to interact with him in his position. You think this, giving them a chance and a heads up will provide them with an opportunity to think about how they will handle things when he is gone. And you think to yourself, of course, my team will appreciate your honesty, my honesty. Again, everything is situational. Ask yourself what you would do in this situation. If providing people with a heads up about somebody else that may or may not happen, may or may not be the right thing to do. And you're just using honesty as a crutch to gossip instead of be honest. So examine yourself, examine your priorities and the reasons for giving out information, and then make a decision about whether or not this would be the honest approach to providing and sharing information. The next item is to be on time. And I know everyone says, well, of course you should be on time. But look at the impact of not being on time. Many people do not come to work on time. Coming to work late makes it nearly impossible to expect others to arrive on time, especially if you're a leader in the organization. If you are thinking, well, that applies to them, but not to me, that is a problem. That's an issue, because you think nobody notices or they don't care. They recognize that I'm the leader and that I don't necessarily need to be on time. Plus, I'm pretty busy. It's not always possible for me to be on time. Also, coming to a meeting of peers late can insult all the other participants and shows that you don't care about their time. Well, you might think that's okay with them. They get some time to talk among themselves, and they seem fairly patient when you walk in the room. Or perhaps they've started the meeting and now there are 5 minutes of remedial catch-up that has to be done with you. That's not a good use of people's time, and it doesn't show respect to their time or to them. Another issue is coming to a scheduled meeting with an employee late. It can demonstrate how little you think of them. Again, I've seen plenty of leaders who think, well, you know, they know I'm busy. It's and everybody recognizes that. So they should expect me not to always be on time. It's just something that I cannot possibly manage. Another quick application exercise. You've been working for a manager for over a year. Business has been booming. This has necessitated you coming in early, working late a lot more than you thought you would be. Things have finally slowed down and you decide to shift your arrival time to a half hour later. This can never make up for the extra time you spent over the past year, but at least you'll get a little bit more sleep. Of course, you think your team will understand because they have been able to see how much extra time you spent at work in the past. That may be a delusional thought. It may be accurate, but it seldom is for people to take a look at you as a manager or supervisor or a leader and say, yeah, he's been working a lot of overtime or she's been working a lot into the evening, or I know that she returns emails at night, that sort of thing. Be realistic about that. The people look at their leader as setting the highest possible standard, not succumbing to something that would set them at a lower and have them operating at a lower standard. Another application exercise, you're a busy supervisor and someone's always trying to talk to you. Every time you head off to your scheduled meeting with your team, you're interrupted. Normally you end up coming in about 10 minutes late, but your team certainly understands how busy you are. Also, if you come in late, you're giving them a chance to chat and catch up with each other. So you're actually doing them a favor. Take a look at this also from the perspective of those individuals who are waiting for you. It may be true that you're busy. You may be busier than everybody else, but coming in late says something to everyone in the room that their time is not as valuable as yours. So take a look at each situation to determine whether or not you should hold yourself to a standard to come in on time every time. Following through on commitments, one of the principles of leadership, one of the basic principles of leadership is to say what you will do and then do what you say. Seems simple, right? But so many times it is not that simple. You can't get everything done. You have too much to do. But if you do say something that you'll do and do what you say, you will gain credibility and your employees will be able to respect the fact that if once in a blue moon you can't get to something, that generally you do what you say what you do and you do what you say. Attempt to meet every deadline every time, even if there is no stated deadline. If you are in a position yourself to request a preferred delivery date, if you're unsure of an upline deadline, so if someone upline is asking for something, you don't know what the deadline is, ask for it. What's your preferred delivery date? When would you like to have this done? This allows upline management to help you get through with your commitments as well. As far as following through on commitments, also don't make excuses. Excuses are, usually you'll revert to the same excuse that maybe you used last time. And again, credibility becomes the issue and getting things done also becomes an issue. Following through on commitments is also tied directly to driving things through to completion. And if you make excuses, you won't be the leader. That is showing that excuses are not acceptable. Also be careful of freezing and indecision. Do something, or at least communicate something, talk to people, let them know what's going on. Even if there's some indecision, if things are not as solid as you need them to be, or the guidelines aren't as solid, don't freeze. Do something and talk to people and let them know where things stand. And of course, resetting a deadline over and over and over is not the answer. It it'll get you, or you'll get away with a few things once in a while by doing that, resetting the deadline, but it's generally not the answer. Another quick application exercise. Your manager asked you to look into some new regulations that impact your business. You agreed to do that, but that person didn't give you a deadline or date that she wanted the information. You haven't done a thing as of yet, but of course there was no deadline. You know the regulations go into place tomorrow, but of course that's your manager's fault because he didn't tell you when he wanted you to get that information to him. Another application exercise. One of your employees asked if he could sit down with you to talk about how he might be able to advance in the company and what opportunities might be available. You scheduled a meeting, but that day turned out to include many fires and you unfortunately had to cancel your meeting. 3 weeks have now passed, but since your employee is not saying anything about meeting, you're just going to ignore it until he brings it up again. When you do set a meeting, and you're in a position to have to cancel, please make sure that you're the one that reschedules. Because again, this tells the employee something about you and how you feel about him or her. The letting 3 weeks pass is bad enough, but then concluding that you will wait until that person comes forward may do damage to that relationship and does not reflect well on you as a leader in the organization. Communicate constantly. I can tell you that no matter what employee survey you do in any organization, almost any organization will say that we can use more communication. Communication is really key. It is not lacking in some, but it's never perfect. So lack or less than optimal communication is something that everyone will point out in their organization. As a leader, make sure that you communicate all the way up and down the chain. It's not just communication to you from people who are above you or sideways. It's you all the way up and down the chain. Someone before this session asked, how do you manage up? And I'm not sure if this is exactly what he was looking for, but managing up is also communicating upwards, being honest upwards, making sure that all directions, including upwards, that you are helping management above you to be successful as well through communication and through constant communication. Include all parties when you're communicating to, even those who may not have a direct role. I would say over communicate rather than under communicate. One of the things you can do is use reply all and CC others liberally, and make sure that even if there's a slight possibility that someone should know about this, keep them on the email string or add them to an email string or to a communication. I know that a lot of people get a lot of emails and they prefer not to get so many emails, but when you miss a communication that could have been provided through an email string, you may miss opportunities that will have an impact on your business and your team and your leaders. Always do take a look at, though, the email string to ensure the content's supposed to go to the next batch of recipients. I've seen some unfortunate situations where someone's been added to an email string and there was something in that email string that probably should not have been shared with that individual. It could be something that was confidential, it could be something about the individual, or it could be something that certainly should not be shared at this point in time. So communicate constantly, be careful about what you do, but make sure that you know that you're, as a leader, responsible to communicate all the way up and down the chain. It's not just management people who are managing you. Another application exercise. The company's going through a lot of change, and you and others have been caught unaware of some of them. You attribute the lack of information to upper management and have observed that many changes are just rolled out without a good plan to make certain that every stakeholder in the company has been briefed. You just heard from another management person that the process to approve certain types of outbound shipments is changing effective today, but no one told you or your team. You decide to use the old process because it's up to management to tell you when something has changed. Shipments go out and 5 hours later, there's a significant issue with your largest client who was expecting and had been briefed on the new process, and now they're significantly unhappy that it was not followed. Of course, this is not your fault, and management above you should take responsibility for this customer service failure. Again, communication up and down. And if you become aware, even if it's at the last minute, look at what your role is and how you can remediate any problems or damage that may occur. And don't look to upper management and use the excuse that somebody else was responsible for this. Once in a while, somebody else is responsible for it, but doing everything you can as a leader in the organization ends up remediating what some of the results of missteps. And that is part of what you do for your coworkers, your managers, and those who work under you as well. You remediate and you help solve problems and issues, even if they could have been avoided in the first place. Giving positive credit. Many people think, I need to showcase what I do in order to be a leader, in order to show others that I can be a leader. And that's true in many ways. You do want people to see what you're doing and take credit and be given credit for things that you do. However, giving credit to others is extremely valuable. Sometimes it's even more valuable than taking credit yourself or getting credit yourself. Always give the positive credit when you can. If you have direct reports, find a way to credit even small things that they do well. That doesn't mean you falsify information or make it, bigger than what it was, but look at what can be recognized to give them credit. Also with peers, share and give credit so that everybody knows that other people were involved. This wasn't my sole decision. This wasn't I wasn't the only player in this situation. There were many others, or there was one other, there were 5 others. So give that positive credit any chance you get. When you do that, what you'll find is that others will do the same. They'll help provide credit to you. So sometimes you end up getting more credit than you may possibly deserve or you expected either. And it's because you're giving positive credit to others. So Jim is on your work team. He has a great idea to improve safety in a particular process that you currently follow. You sit down with him about the idea. It's good, but it needs a ton of revision to actually make it work. In fact, you end up reworking about 90% of the idea, and it's barely recognizable when you actually implement what is left of it. You know how things morph and change. The idea is implemented. Your supervisor's really happy with you for bringing it online. You spend a great deal of time reworking the idea from Jim, and you contemplate letting your supervisor know that fact, that, well, really, Jim started with the seed of the idea, but I probably spent 20 times more time than he did. And really, this is now my idea. In the end, however, you simply tell your supervisor that this was Jim's idea and he should be recognized and given credit for it. Again, this can come back around to you too, because as Jim is the beneficiary this time, he may make you the beneficiary next time. And there may be other beneficiaries also of crediting positive ideas and giving positive credit. Speaking positively about everyone. Everyone loves to criticize management. I mean, it's kind of a thing that we do. But speaking positive about people upline is probably a better thing to do. Supporting upline management is great, because then you provide a foundation for others to support upline management also. Supporting your peers is important as well. So sometimes I hear a lot about interdepartmental stress and issues. Support your peers as much as you possibly can, because that support goes both directions. And then, of course, support subordinates. It doesn't mean that you give in to things that don't make any sense, or that you support them when they need guidance or correction, but support subordinates in most regards is really important. I have a program that I call SOS, Sponsoring Our Success, and it's really simple. This is not a program that you need to go and spend 3 hours or half a day or a day learning. It's just as simple as this. that there are really only two ways to operate in the workplace. The first choice is to sponsor each other's success, and the second is to sponsor each other's failure. If you sponsor each other's success, you're going to see success for yourself and for everybody else. So it's SOS, sponsor our success. If you support each other's failure, sooner or later, you'll guarantee your own. Taking responsibility, a project, task, etc., that reports up to you is really your ultimate responsibility. Accept and embrace that responsibility and don't blame others for failures. The blame game works in the short term, but not in the long term. Also know when to make a mid-course correction. So if there's something that just cannot be managed and you need to change, then make that change. If it's a project or a task or whatever, make the mid-course change. Don't wait for someone else to make that change if you already know that a change needs to be made. And then, of course, debrief, rebrief, and repeat. So go through what your projects or tasks are, look at them, debrief, and share information with others who need to know so that you can take responsibility and so that you're in a good position to get projects, tasks, and everything done, because it is your responsibility. And if you have to rebrief others and repeat the rebriefs, then do it. Many things that are out there in the workplace are things that people only deal with once or twice a year. And, I've often heard, oh, no one's following this process. No one's following this. We talked about this a year ago, or we talked about this 2 years ago. Rebriefing is part of the landscape as a leader, recognizing when to rebrief and go back to education and training and retrain is just part of the program. It's not terrible that people forget. It's in their nature to overlay things that they've learned with new things. So rebriefing and debriefing and repeating is really important. One way to make sure that you can take responsibility and are successful doing that is to take notes when you're in internal meetings, with external client discussions, and at all times, unless you're one of those rare people that has a photographic memory. I see fewer and fewer people taking notes. And if you take notes, it does two things for you. First of all, as you're taking notes, you have a level of consciousness that is actually executing as you're taking the notes. So you have a level of consciousness and absorption of whatever your responsibility is on a task and what you need to do. When you go back and reread those notes, that information is then solidified in your mind. And you can be that person that doesn't forget, doesn't fail to follow through, and takes full responsibility because you have given yourself the chance to be successful in doing that. An application exercise. Last week, you started working on a new project, and unfortunately, you haven't been able to get it done because you're waiting on IT to give you some feedback. The deadline for completion and update on the project is tomorrow, and you intend to let management know that you could not make any progress because of the IT department. So what good does that do you? And what good does that do the organization or any around you and the IT department? In order to sponsor their success, you go back to the IT department and ask for something, or you create something that is without the IT component, and then you fill in the blanks later. So setting someone else up for failure doesn't work well, and missing a deadline or setting yourself up to blame somebody to that you missed a deadline doesn't work well either. Bringing solutions. I would say that 95% of people out there can identify problems pretty well, or at least identify what most of the components of a problem entail. So identifying problems is good. You just want to come up with several solutions when you bring the problem forward. And 5% of people, I would say, look at that problem and always say, you know what, here are a couple of ideas, or here's one idea, or half of an idea, or just, a tiny piece of information that may create a solution. Be prepared to solve the problem, and don't leave that up to someone else. It is Certainly good that you're part of the 95% that can identify a problem, but being a part of the 5% that bring forward a possible solution doesn't mean that your solution is the right one, or that it's the perfect one, or that anyone will even use it, but at least bring something out there as a potential solution. If you have identified a problem, make certain of your facts. So when you're in that problem solution mode, if you have 5 times a year this problem is an issue, and you think it's 500 times a year that your company or your business unit has experienced this problem, there's a huge gap between the problem and the facts. So look at what the problem is, the scope of the problem, and make sure that your facts are accurate. If 5 times a year something comes up and it needs remediation, that is very different than having an incident, something that's coming up 500 times a year. Bring the facts when you identify a problem, and then model the behavior to bring solutions. Also expect your employees to bring solutions with every problem. What you're doing is you're trying to develop leaders for the future yourself. So you want each person who walks in your door, who walks up to you, or who addresses you, or you address via video conference, you want them to do what you are doing, which is bringing solutions to every problem. Even again, if those solutions aren't perfect, they're not ideal, and some of them may be even silly, but everything begins with a thought. The wheel began with a thought. Somebody saw a rock, saw that it was kind of round, you could push it, and you might get somewhere faster by putting something on top of it. Every journey begins with an idea, with a thought. So help your people, help all of your employees bring solutions with every problem, and set the expectation that they do that. So you've noticed over the last 3 years, the OSHA reporting log is not up to date, and it's not ready to file by the deadline. The problem stems from managers just not entering information on the log. The filing's been late every year, puts the company in jeopardy, but you've pointed out to management time and time again the filing's late. What else can you possibly do? You bring me solutions, don't bring me problems, BMSD, BMP. Think of several solutions, or maybe one, or maybe two, that would help, putting it online, or sending out a reminder, or making sure that when an incident report is filed, that it automatically triggers something out to the management person who filed it. So there are many ways to skin a cat. There are many ways to provide solutions, and bring those solutions when you can. The next concept is pretty common, but not often articulated in companies. And I think that is to be kind. Be kind in everything you do. Be nice, be kind, but be real. So don't patronize people, don't patronize your employees, but be nice and be kind, and think of them as people who deserve that. Nearly everyone you meet in life is dealing with a battle that you know nothing about. And I'm sure you've seen many of these statements online. Robin Williams was one who promoted this. And as most people know, what happened to Robin Williams, he was a person with many, many issues and problems. And I'm sure he battled his problems quietly in the background, and no one knew about them. So be that person that's kind and nice and real. A person's battle is not yours, and you don't need to take on their battle, but you don't want to create a new battle for them. Another one of the most basic precepts of leadership is taking only what belongs to you. All time belongs to the company when you're working for the company. Postage, product, credit, and did we mention time? Time is when you have made a commitment to work for the company as a leader or in any capacity, the time that you say you spend should be spent. So taking it away from the company in any way is not taking only what belongs to you, because at that point it doesn't belong to you. And I know I hear a lot about, well, my company treats me like a professional, or we treat our employees like professionals, and we believe they'll get their job done. And that's true. And that's a good concept. However, if you are not getting things done and things are not are not done on the time that you have with the company, then you are taking something that doesn't belong to you. So it's not just physical things, but it's also time. So there's been a box of unused product out in the warehouse for 5+ years. You determine the company doesn't want or intend to use a product, but you do have a use for it at home. What should you do? Very simple. You just ask whether you can take it. The same thing goes for time or for anything else that the company should be expecting to have. So if you want to take time off, or you need time off, or you need to take some time to, an afternoon to go do something, let your company, let your management people know, because that is their time, and the company can say, and probably should say, hey, that doesn't quite work out for us. Could you possibly take that time at some other day or other time? Listening and hearing are two different things. A lot of people appear to listen. So, they put it out there and they appear to listen, but they don't hear what you're saying. One way to correct that is to paraphrase what people tell you. If I'm hearing correctly, and then paraphrase it accurately to what the person said, or at least what you think you heard. It's really difficult, but try not to interrupt to make your own point. It is very difficult to stop yourself from checking out while another person is talking, because you might want to craft your next words and your responses. When you're either interrupting or checking out while a person is talking to you, crafting your own response, you end up possibly missing the point or not being able to hear correctly. Always concentrate on what the other person is saying and what they mean, not just what they're saying, but what they actually mean. Again, you can go back and say, if I'm hearing correctly, this is what you're asking for. It's not insulting to people. It's a good way to get clarification and clarity around what the communication is. Another concept of leadership principle is supporting change. You should support change in your organization, even if you don't agree with it. Change is just going to happen. And face it, none of us really like change. We say we do, but we really don't. Be a change agent, forge ahead with change, and work hard to implement it, rather than saying it just won't work. It certainly may not work. Changes don't always work, and that's why there's another change. And don't ignore signs and issues that a mid-course correction may be in order, though. So that is your responsibility as a leader to take a look at, well, this is not working. We've given it a shot, and here are the components that don't work. Here's some ideas, problem solution that we could possibly apply to either change the change or start something completely new. It is within your purview as a leader to support change, yet be in that position to say at some time down the road, and it may be quickly, may be something that fails right away or just doesn't do what it's intended to do. Be that person that can work on a mid-course correction without saying, I told you so, because you don't need to say that. It doesn't need to be implied or said. You can work with your team and other teams to do mid-course corrections, because sometimes they're just in order. Upper management just announced that everyone will need to attend a huddle before every shift to review what will be happening each day and to debrief the prior day to avoid any repeated issues. You think huddles are a waste of time. They should be held out on the site to give more context to a discussion. You tell your team that you would much rather huddle on site, if at all, because you're not really supporting this, but management wants it done in this particular way. So we're going to do it their way. Are you supporting management? Are you supporting that change? And the clear answer is no. In fact, you're fomenting dissent. as opposed to supporting change. It doesn't mean you have to swallow every change once and if there are changes that are not effective, because that's your job too, to help straighten things out when they are not effective. Sometimes I think about this as kind of, seems kind of something that nobody should really have to talk about, but refrain from partying and spending certain types of time with people. Once you step up to supervision of other employees, there should be a space between you and your former peers. Space is not above, but it's a space between. And in that space, there's a separation for partying, taking favored and former friends out for lunch, or conducting yourself inappropriately in any way. It's difficult to step away from that, especially if you've been with people for a long time. But once you are supervising or managing, make sure that there is some sort of separation. Not that you can't attend a function, just don't indulge in mood altering agents with your direct reports at all, ever. And make sure that everything that you do looks equal. It doesn't have to be fair. It doesn't have to be exactly equal, but it doesn't appear to be favoritism. And it's difficult to do, especially if you grew up in an organization and you're one of those people who's being promoted, which is the best thing that can happen. Rejecting gossip. Knowing the difference between common discussion and gossip. Gossip is something that may include, don't tell anyone else, but I heard that. That's gossip. Gossip includes getting in the corners and bringing up issues that lack any business context. You can try to make them appear to have business context, but if they don't, then it's gossip. It is very insidious, and management can't indulge in gossip. A partner to that is demonstrating respect for everyone. By showing respect for others, you can earn respect for yourself. Credit opinions, even if you don't agree. So you do earn respect by doing that. And it's okay if you dissent once in a while and you say that you dissent, that's fine. But show respect for everyone. Look up immediately and acknowledge a visitor's presence as soon as they approach or enter your office or your workspace, or they get on the video with you. Acknowledge their presence so that they know that you know they're there. And then return all calls and correspondence within, and I put in here 1 hour of receipt, if not immediately, if only to tell a person that you're working on their request. This is particularly important between departments and within employees in an organization. You can have a different standard than 1 hour. You can say 2 hours. You can say 40 hours if you want to. But if 1 hour is doable and immediate is doable, then at least acknowledge that you're working on a request. And then deliver results within 1 hour of receipt, or whatever you decide is appropriate, but make sure that it's something that demonstrates that you are respectful of that person's time, that they may be waiting for you, and they may need something from you to move forward with something they're working on. One of the things that I've seen occasionally is telling a subordinate, oh, I'm really busy, or we're in the middle of something, I'm going on a vacation, so can you wait? Or I'm waiting on something from X management or from somebody else. When you tell somebody that, you're signaling to them also that whatever they're telling you is not important enough for you to go do something about it. And I'm busy, I'm too busy for you. I think the most powerful management tool for leaders is humility. As C.S. Lewis said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So think of the spotlight being on the person that you're talking to, the person that you're guiding, the person that you're working with. The spotlight's on them, not on you. If you keep that spotlight on them, you may be able to demonstrate humility. Don't think of yourself, how will this impact me? I mean, of course, there are impacts to you for many different things, but humility is thinking of the other person first and thinking of yourself less. Put others first. And as we said in the beginning, remember it's a privilege to lead. And then make sure that you're thanking others for their contributions all the time. Even if you can even if you have to hunt for something to thank people for, and find the good work in what others do. Beyond anything else, hold yourself to the highest possible standard before you hold anyone else to any standard. Really important, because as people examine what you do, so they do, or at least they have an excuse or a reason not to do something if you don't hold yourself to the highest possible standard. So just in recap, have you built the right foundation? One thing that I'd love to have everyone do after you get off this call is to choose 2 of the principles that we covered today that might be challenging for you. And then focus on examining your own performance with regard to each for the next 2 months or 1 month or whatever period of time makes sense to you. And then rate your own performance against the intended performance. So and please don't check the first 2 principles that are not really challenging for you that you already have mastered. Then move on to 2 or more principles which are challenging, or on to 2 more principles which are challenging to you, maybe less challenging than the first 2. And then review your performance against the principles that you think you have mastered. So there's always room for improvement. The second that you think you have arrived as far as leadership, you probably haven't arrived. Arriving doesn't ever really happen. You just keep moving toward the goal of being the best leader that you can be. And then one last thing I would say is schedule and take a whitewater raft trip with at least 1 Class 4 rapids. Learn from the actions of the raft supervisor and apply those principles. Raft supervisor or a guide sits in the back of the boat, steers when necessary in rough water, smooth water, and medium water, and calls out different guidance to people depending upon the solution. So it might be, the left side needs to row, the right side needs to row backwards. The left side needs to row forward, the right side needs to row backwards. And those are just things that as a leader, you can look at what a whitewater raft trip leader and guide does and possibly apply those to your own leadership. Again, looking at whitewater raft leadership, look at this particular person sitting in the back of the boat and guiding 6 people through, I'd say this is probably a low class 3 rapids, but looks kind of fun. And if you can envision yourself there, just think of how situations develop and how you might be able to emulate what those guides do. And at the end, you'll have a happy celebration because you haven't capsized the boat, hopefully. Okay, do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like anybody's posed any questions, Becky. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. And Margie, if you want to let everyone know again about the recording.
Sure. Thank you again for attending today's session. We will be sending out certificates, and the recording will be sent out to you as well within the next week. We thank you so much for attending and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.